Welcome back to the Restricted Area Podcast. I am your host, TP Hammock, but I am not alone, as of course I am joined by a cast of characters, this being Brett Riemann, Nick Sutton, Payne Golden, and stepping in for Jackson Harris, as he is doing something tonight, we have Josh Garnett. He was not here on our last recording 2 weeks ago. And Josh, I'm gonna hand the floor over to you. You can tell yourself or talk about yourself and what team you like, what conferences you like, favorite player maybe, and just a little bit more about you.
All right, I appreciate you having me. So I'm a graduate of Auburn, so clearly I'm a big Auburn fan as we are doing pretty good right now. I like keeping up with just, the SEC in general. I'd say my other conference I like keeping up with is probably the Big 12 since they're usually pretty solid through and through. And yep, that's about it for me.
That's great. We're happy to have you on the podcast. And gentlemen, we're going to start off with Big 12 play and one team in particular that's very close to Brett's heart, and that is the Kansas Jayhawks this week, after bouncing back from that UCF loss about 2 weeks ago, came into this week, got a big win early in the week, but then yesterday fell in Morgantown, and a lot of things, a lot of teams have fallen in Morgantown to the West Virginia Mountaineers, and Jayhawks were not an exception as they lost 91-85. So Brett, tell us what you saw from your squad, what you liked, and what you hope to see change for their next matchup and who they play next.
Absolutely. Obviously, to start the week, phenomenal showing in Stillwater. No road game in the Big 12 this year is a gimme. So winning one that convincingly is very positive. Looked really good across the board. Big three players of McCullough, Harris, and Dickinson were great. But also going down deeper into the depth of the team, Johnny Furphy finally started hitting some threes, which was badly needed. And that was a really positive game. And then obviously a very rough one in Morgantown. I think Kansas always struggles in Morgantown and in Ames. They just, those are two places I think they're kind of tough to get to. Like, it was a pretty grueling travel week for Kansas, so that didn't help, to be sure. But also you got to give credit to the Mountaineers. They don't necessarily have the record to reflect it, in part because they've been missing their players for a lot of the season, but they are a solid squad. And they just shot the absolute crap out of the ball too. I think 57% from three. And they had guys going in there hitting fadeaways in the lane that they had no business hitting, contested threes. They just played really good ball. But I mean, even when that happens, because that will happen and that will happen in the tournament, Kansas is a team that needs to be able to overcome that. And they didn't. They were a little sloppy. They were sloppy getting rebounds down the stretch. They really started going cold with the shots in the second half, which really hurt their momentum. And there were a few positives. Furphy was good. Timberlake was good. The depth is a major question mark for this team. So it's not like there were no positives. It's not like it was a terrible performance, but obviously to lose that one in Morgantown is heartbreaking, and it's pretty crushing. It really hurts the title odds. It's going to be a slog in the Big 12, and dropping that one to UCF a couple weeks ago, and then this one, it sure doesn't help. And one thing in particular that I noticed that I kind of want to point out is you go back to that UCF game 2 weeks ago. Kansas was rolling. They were up like 16 close to halftime. UCF switches to a zone scheme, and Kansas just gets completely stifled. And I think Kansas scored about 25 points in the last 25 minutes of that game, which really just does not cut it. And you saw a similar thing in the West Virginia game, that Kansas was rolling on offense. They had built up a bit of a lead. And to be fair to them, it was tough to develop momentum because West Virginia just kept on hitting shots when they really didn't seem like they were gonna but they just kept on hitting shots, and then to keep them in it, and then they switched to his own scheme, and that once again gave Kansas issues. So I think that's a question for Bill Self, and I'm generally not one to question him because I think he is the best coach currently in the game, and I think that he'll do the right thing in the long run. But I think that's a cause for concern. That's something that needs looking at. But I think honestly, some of the bigger questions about the long-term success of this team for the tournament, such as their shooting, their turnovers, and their depth, are being answered in a positive way. So even though they took that loss, I'd look for them to be really good this week because they always are coming back off a loss, and keep progressing moving forward. We'll see if they can get into championship contention or not.
Yeah, I'm going to build on what Brett was just saying. I think he had a great analysis on their last week and a half of basketball with that loss at UCF and then that loss at West Virginia and Morgantown. I just think a thing that sticks out to me that's really poignant, they had a 1-point lead in the last 3 minutes of the game in Morgantown. They weren't able to close it out. I know it's only a 1-point lead, but if you have a 1-point lead on the road at a team that's under 500, I don't think that bodes well for March because closing out games, you can't really put a price on that. You gain a lot of experience from closing out games early in the season, in the middle of the season. Kansas obviously has some big wins over Kentucky and UConn, but can they carry that into March rather than their end of game? I don't want to say collapse, but the inability to finish off the deal, in Morgantown with that 1-point lead inside of 3 minutes. I think Brett brings up a good point. Kansas has the ability to make a March run, but I think there's a lot of red flags with this team, and I think there's certainly a lot of debate when it comes to Kansas's ability to make a deep run later this year.
So my question to you, Brett, and we'll move on, is as the AP poll is coming out tomorrow, where do you think your Jayhawks will land and why?
They're going to slide. They took that loss to UCF last week and didn't actually move any because there were so many losses in the top 10. That wasn't the case this week. They're going to drop quite a bit. I would guess somewhere in the range of 7. So that's about where I'd put them. I think that'd be about right for now. I think they're not out of the running for a 1 seed, but they're going to have to play their way back up into that if that's what they're hoping to get at this stage.
Well, good deal. And on the opposite side of the spectrum, as one team has struggled over the last 2 weeks against, let's put it nicely, inferior opponents, as the Jayhawks have fallen to the UCF Knights and the West Virginia Mountaineers, a team that has been on fire lately has been the Auburn Tigers. I know 2 gentlemen in this call right now would love nothing more than to talk about Auburn. I'm going to open up to you, Payne, and then Josh, I want you to step in whenever Payne is finished. Talk about the week as Auburn got a big victory, and you were in attendance for the game in Vanderbilt, where Auburn was able to get a pretty comfortable win there. And then came home, welcomed home Alan Flanagan, a former Auburn Tiger with Ole Miss, and really comfortably won that one as well. So talk about this week for the Auburn Tigers as they just continue to win and keep climbing the polls, don't they, Payne?
Yeah, absolutely. The Vanderbilt game, I mean, everybody kind of knew how that was going to go. I mean, I was a little doubtful at first. I was a little worried just because I was an Auburn fan in a stadium full of Vanderbilt fans in the Vanderbilt student section. Most people at Vandy were not happy with me, including Vanderbilt's mascot. He gave me some dirty looks.
Stadium full of Vanderbilt fans was a little generous.
I meant the student section, which also was not full of Vanderbilt fans, considering I was in the front row and I was probably the loudest one there. Yeah, I'm gonna say the same thing that I said in the last episode. This Auburn team it feels special. It feels completely different than some of the teams in the past, especially the first one that comes to mind for me was the 2021-22 team with Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler. I mean, absolutely incredible talent on that team didn't have the depth and didn't have the consistency to make a run. I think this team is really different, and that showed both in the Vanderbilt game and in the Ole Miss game. Yep. Obviously, Vanderbilt is not a tournament team, but Auburn showed what type of team they are. There's not really a ton of star power on this team. There's no like top 5 picks on this team unless Aiden Holloway's game develops astronomically. But the team has so much depth. Any guy on this team can play at a star level at any given moment, and a lot of the time somebody's going to on any given day. 2 guys that I'm going to highlight especially for that game were obviously Jalen Williams, who I'm going to be talking about later. He's a 5th year. I mean, I don't think the expectations for Jalen were crazy high going into this season, but he has developed into one of Auburn's better scorers. And against Vanderbilt, he didn't miss a shot. He went 100%. And then against Ole Miss yesterday, didn't have the exact same efficiency. He still shot 71% from the field, didn't miss a free throw, scored 21 points. He's an absolute difference maker for this team, and I didn't expect it, but it's great going forward as conference play continues, as we soon get into the conference tournament up here in Nashville, and then hopefully March Madness. The other guy I want to highlight is a favorite amongst Auburn fans, but doesn't get a lot of national recognition because he's not that crucial of a player, is Dylan Cardwell. Dylan brings a completely different wrinkle to this team. He's a bench big. He has averaged like maybe 2 points a game over the last 2 years, but this year he still doesn't score a whole lot, but he's an incredible perimeter defender. Nobody's out rebounding him when he's in the game. And his inside scoring has developed a lot too. He put up, I think 12 or 14 points against Ole Miss. Now, a lot of that was in garbage time, and most of those were put back dunks, but it's a huge, crucial piece to have. And when I look back at past Auburn teams that haven't finished out their run after having an incredible regular season, like the 2019 team, the big problem for that team after Chuma Okeke got hurt was there was nobody in the front court that could compete with these bigs on these elite teams like Virginia. There was nobody who could stop DeAndre Hunter. And I don't know if Dylan Cardwell is that type of guy that could defend against DeAndre Hunter. But, the combination of him and Janai Broome is absolutely incredible on the inside. And then we have guys on the outside that can shoot the lights out of the stadium. You've got guys like Aiden Holloway, Trey Donaldson, Chad Baker-Mazara, even Katie Johnson when he wants to, every now and then. But there's just so many guys that can give you meaningful minutes on this team. Against Ole Miss, they went 11 different players scored at least 1 point. There's so much, like the floor of each player on this team is so high. And every 2 or 3, sometimes 4 of them are going to hit their ceiling in any given game. It's only a matter of who. Trey Donaldson has been Auburn's leading scorer multiple times this season. He is an incredible shooter. He didn't get a lot of looks against Ole Miss because he didn't need to. He only scored 3 points. He shot 1 3, hit it. That's all he needed to do. Auburn wins by 23. Bruce Pearl has so much talent on this team. There's so many guys that can do anything. It's so much fun to watch.
All right, so this is where I'm gonna chime in. So I'm gonna piggyback off of you. I think the progress that Dylan Cardwell has made this year is just really kind of mind blowing because it's still, I think he's averaging around 6 points a game, but if you watch I think this past week he averaged 12 a game, which is, I think he had 2 career high games, back-to-back 12-point games, which is just, a lot of people probably wouldn't have expected that, but if you just look across the league, there's not many other teams that are getting this production from their backup 5, let alone just how consistent he's been doing it.